Hi. Okay, so I'm glad I'm going now when you've all had your sugar, as Mike mentioned. But also, Mike, they could have been hyped because they're excited about GA4, right? No, nobody's excited about GA4. I know how this rolls. I know I called it this, but it's also a little bit of a bait and switch because really what this presentation should have been called is silly things you can do in Google Tag Manager to record issues in real time, I realized after I pitched the title. So here's what we're gonna talk about. So the reason why I wrote this presentation is because I've been doing this a long time, as Mike mentioned, 25 years now, and it's not the first thing I did out of university either. And one of the things is, it's almost 2026. Why am I looking for problems? Instead, problems should be coming to me. I would like a problem to pop up and say, hello, I'm a problem, please fix me. I don't want to have to do crawls and then go through the crawls. I just want to know what the issue is so that I can go out and fix the issue. And I also want to do that for our clients because our clients are never going to do a crawl, right? Those of you agency side, the clients are like, oh, I'm totally going to check it. Narrator, they did not check it, right? We know that. And so one of the things is like having these issues pop up and come to you, it means that you can actually get them fixed in theory. And one of the things you can do for checking this stuff is to use your website visitor experiences intel. Because your visitors are already on your website, they're already doing weird stuff, right? Have you ever watched, say, your in-laws use the internet, right? Like my father-in-law, who's not watching this, so that my wife is watching this. Hi, Ashley. My father-in-law, he used to use a search engine called Dogpile. Do we remember Dogpile? And he would go on Dogpile and he would search for Google. And then he would go on Google and then he would search for what he was searching for. So good job, Mike. It was really fun to watch him use websites just generally to be like, oh, you think that's clickable? Neat. So those are the kinds of things that people do when they use the internet. They break it all the time. So why not just listen to what they're doing and then use that as your intel? And I am using Google Tag Manager and GA4 in this presentation, but you can use this in anything. You can take this and put it in Matomo Tag Manager. You can do this in Amplitude. You can do this in Segment. It doesn't matter. All these principles I'm talking about are accessible JavaScript variables, JavaScript like stuff that you can listen to in the data layer. Everything is available to you no matter what tool you're using. I don't really care what tool you use. I teach GA4. Not everybody likes GA4. I'm okay with that. I don't care. Just do something and make sure you're measuring this stuff. I'm not going to judge you on what tool you're using. But if it's a good one, let me know, because I always want to find out about fun new tools. And one of the things that I'll be doing in this talk is I'll be going through these common technical issues. And I asked Sam, who's coming up after me, I messaged her on one of the many Slacks that we're in together. And I said, what are the kinds of things that you would want to know, that you would want to have surfaced for you? And she gave me this fantastic laundry list of issues. And so this is what I'm going through in the presentation. So thanks, Sam, for telling me all the things that I should make sure that I'm tracking in our technical SEO reviews. Because yes, I did SEO for many years. I still do technical SEO audits, but nobody comes to us because things are great. I'm not dealing with necessarily like the in-depth issues or the scale of issues like weed maps. I'm dealing with like this chiropractor's website is a little screwed up, and it's because the developer didn't click the let search engines index this site button on WordPress. Like, oh, that'll be $2,000, thanks so much, right? So like, that's the kind of things that I fix. So that's why I wanted to double check with somebody who does deeper technical SEO than I do on a regular basis to make sure I'm catching all this stuff. So we're gonna go through this. And the reason why I'm using events in GA4, and so again, no matter what tool you're using, I do recommend using events because you could, for example, look at how many times a page was viewed, of things like, page not found, for example, the title is page not found, and say, oh, look, there's a rise in 404s. But I prefer using events because that gives you specific spikes of when things occur. So for example, this is a chart of JavaScript error recording on a website. And obviously, the developer did something at the end of October that was not good. And we need to know what it is. And it's pretty obvious exactly the day that it was added. There's that big spike. And this is a B2B site, so it goes down on weekends in terms of traffic. But what is that error? When was it pushed? We can go back and take a look at they use Bitbucket. We can look at the Bitbucket logs and see exactly what was pushed and what's the problem and be able to fix that up right away. So the other thing that events unlock are count metrics. And so this is a GA4 specific tip that I'm going to share with you. One of the things that I always do is I add a custom metric to count how many times that specific event occurred. And I do that because in GA4, you probably have used these reports where you've got this little drop down here. I don't think the people who designed the GA4 interface actually use reporting at all. GA4, don't get me wrong, is a fantastic data collection tool. I love the new event model. I think it's great. It's a huge step up from UA. The user interface is not good. It's not good. So it's not a good reporting tool. And so you can use this drop down here for event count. You can say how many times this particular event happened, that particular event happened, but you can't save that drop down and load up the report and just see event count. For that, you can't just grab that event count. So that's fine. I'm going to fix this. I was fed up with the problem, and so I just fixed it myself. And so now, by adding a count metric, I can see how many times something happened. So for example, this is a report for what's called content consumption. If it's a Google Tag Manager and WordPress, Google Tag Manager template, or WordPress plugin that we've released that measures how long someone spends on the website. Did they stay long enough on the page and actually read that piece of content based on the word count? Did they scroll to the bottom of the content? If that is true, then the content was consumed. And by having a count metric, I can see how many page views, because views is technically a count metric of all the page view events. And then we have the number of scrolls, dwells, and consumes. And then we can even do a calculated metric of the content consumed rate, which is just the number of consumed divided by the number of views. And that's what a count metric gets you, is the ability to add these individual metrics in a report, or say in Looker Studio. And this is how you set it up. So this is an example of a tag from our default GTM container. This is for email link, somebody clicking on an email link. And so down here at the very bottom, and I almost put it at the very top, and I'm glad I didn't because this thing is here, which is blocking people's views. But down here at the very, very bottom, there's an event parameter, email link count, value of 1. And what that does is every time this event is recorded, it increments that value by 1. So then you would register that parameter in GA4 as a custom metric of email link count. And then what would happen is then it would record the number of times that that event was recorded. It's so stupid that I have to do this. Okay, when I came up with this idea, I was like, it is ridiculous that I have to do this, but here we are in 2026 almost, making silly workarounds. But what's great about it is that there's no way in Looker Studio to be able to record how often a specific event occurred unless it is a key event, it's just a conversion. We know it's all conversions. Key events is a silly name too. I'm just going to stand up here and bash on GA4. No one from Google is here, right? We're okay? All right. Hope they're not watching. Anyway, I talk to Ginny Marvin semi-regularly, who's the ads liaison at Google, and she passes along all my bug complaints, which I really appreciate. Anyway, so so this is one of the ways you can track how many times something specific happened. Otherwise, the only way you can do this is in Looker Studio. You could see how many times a key event has occurred, but there's no way to see how many times a normal event that isn't a page view event has occurred, and there's no way to tell if it isn't a key event, how many times it has occurred in anything, like in Looker Studio, for example. So you might want to start adding this. I add this to all my events that I send off to GA4. That's not what we're talking about here, though, so let's track some stuff. That's my preamble as to why count metrics are really important. Some of these are pretty easy, and some of them require a bit more work to make happen, but they're all pretty self-explanatory. I have lots and lots of screenshots because I want you to be able to take this presentation and go back home and be able to set it up. So here's the first one. So there's lots and lots of different ways to track a 404 error. This is WordPress. So conveniently, in the body class of all WordPress websites, unless your developer's done something horribly wrong, it starts off with error 404. And I mean, I don't put it past developers, bless their hearts, to do something weird, but most of them haven't touched that. So usually the body class of a WordPress website has error 404. You could track if the page title says page not found, for example. You're going to want to track first, so to make sure there is tracking in 404 pages, because that's also a fun surprise when that happens. So in this case, we're just going to say record an event every time a body class has error 404. And in this case, we'll use a DOM element variable in Google Tag Manager. So the DOM element is the document object model, if you're not familiar with it, and it reads the class of the body. So body class, this is exactly how you set that up. And then your trigger is also very simple. It's just page view DOM ready. The trigger fires on DOM element body class contains error 404. And then if this body class contains lots of other useful stuff, for example, what type of post it was or page, then you can also use it to build, say, content grouping, for example. This variable, we use it quite a lot. It is really handy for all sorts of different things. And you'll want to run this on DOM ready because you need the DOM to exist before you can listen to parts of it, right? So you'll want to delay this trigger just a little bit. And for the name of the event, I have called it Page View 404. Why did I call it that instead of 404 Page View? So I call it Page View 404 for two reasons. One, I prefer to use the object action model. So the object is the page that was viewed and the action is that at 404'd. And then the other reason is you can't start event names in GA4 with a number. Technically, I mean, I've sent emoji event names off to GA4 using Google Tag Manager. It works, but you can't do anything with that event in GA4. You cannot make it a key event. You cannot use it in an audience. I think it breaks when you try to use it in explorations. So just do not start your event names with numbers in GA4. Also, please don't use spaces in GA4, same problem. Thanks so much. Stop it. And all lowercase as well. If I'm complaining about event names that other people make, all lowercase, no spaces, underscores, thank you. That's all. I'm just gonna go now. All right, related to this, what if I wanted to capture 404s that are specifically from links? So this event can capture specifically if people come to, if it's an internal link or an external link. So this is a lookup table. And so the input variable is the refer, which is the URL that people were on before this current URL. And then the input is, and this is my website, but obviously you would put your own website in here. And then the output is if it's internal or external. And then what I have here is the default value. So these are our domains that we use. And then the default value is external. So if it's not one of those domains, it's an external domain. And then for the page view, same idea. You use exactly the same trigger, and you can use the same trigger for multiple tags. You don't need to make a new trigger for every tag in Google Tag Manager. Stop doing that too. Thank you. Okay, I clean up a lot of GTMs. And then this is how you set up the tag. So we're using the output of the lookup table to prepend the event parameter. So in this case, the event name is whatever, if it's internal or external, underscore link, underscore 404, right? So it's internal link 404, external link 404, and then same thing for the parameter to populate the count metric. Again, you're using the output of the variable. So that way you have two potential events that are running off of one tag and the same trigger you were using for the 404s as well. Next thing I want you to record are URLs that have encoding in them. For example, your sweet PR person doesn't realize you can't put spaces in URLs and they just go ahead and do it anyway because the CMS let them do it. Why is it a problem? And then you realize that About Us has like a percentage sign 20 in the middle of it, right? So what you can do in this case, this is a really simple trigger. You're just looking at the page view where the page path contains a percentage symbol. That's all. That's all you're looking for. And then you would record event when that happens. Now, the downside of this is that if your site is translated into languages other than English, you're probably going to have an accent of some kind. For example, accent aigu. And so this is for this is our team en français. And so because of that, what happens is it takes the accent aigu and it turns it into this C3, blah, 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 blah. So if you have that, what I would recommend is making a list of the accepted entity values, because it'll look like this in the address bar, but then when you look at it behind the scenes, it will look like this, and this is what will get recorded in GA4. So to avoid that, or to at least flag that if you don't want that to happen, then you would have it as an exclusion on your tag. So when you have a tag, you have the firing trigger, so it records this. So this is our original one where it's just the percentage symbol. And then you would add an exception, which is, okay, but don't fire it if it's true that it is like our allowed entities, for example. And so again, this is if you're dealing with multilingual websites, then you can just, there's lots of resources with an entire list of entities, grab the ones that are relevant to you, toss it into ChatGPT or whatever, get them to build a regex table for, a regex list for you that you can then pop into GTM. And if you do ask, by the way, AIs are really good at building regex, because regex is horrible. I don't know who came up with it, but very. No, it's not. No, it's not good. It's not. Don't defend regex. No. We can fight outside later. But I used to box, so keep that in mind. Okay. It's weird, and it doesn't make any sense, and anyway. Regex is bad. It should feel bad. Okay, do you guys really like regex? I feel like this is the first time I've ever talked about this. Thank you. Mike said regex sucks. It's not a good language, people. No, I refuse to accept this narrative. All right. We're moving on. It's a weird place here. All right. Just America in general. I'm Canadian, by the way, in case you didn't know that. So I can say that from up here. All right. Wow, I never had anybody get rowdy before I wrote regex. Although this is the nerdiest conference probably I've ever spoken at, so that's probably something to do with it. Yeah. Okay. Anyway. So you can take, if you want to write your regex by hand, then by all means, knock yourself out. I don't do that because I have other things I want to do with my time, like play fantasy football. So I take all the entities and I put it into Claude. And yeah, if you want fantasy football advice, let me know. I'm happy to look at your lineup and tell you what you're doing wrong. Anyway, so then you would use that as an exclusion trigger. And that way you know that these are the allowed entities that are okay, and then these are the not allowed entities. So for example, if somebody starts making like URLs in Spanish and there's there's like the C with the little thingy underneath it. I don't know what that's called. Sorry. In Canada, we only talk about French. We don't talk about Spanish, so I don't know. But I've seen it. So you could also say that like that entity specifically I want to watch out for. I want to make sure people don't, go off book in terms of translating these URLs. So this can definitely be a great starting point for catching those particular entities. And then, of course, uppercase. So maybe your server doesn't thing for uppercase. Everything okay there? All right. Do you guys like regex and you're shutting me off? That's okay. Anyway, so you can use a regex trigger condition. This one is really easy. It matches in capital letter. That's all. Very simple trigger in this case. And you'll want to trigger the page path because, of course, the full URL, if somebody came to your website via, say, Google Ads, there will be uppercase in the click ID that comes through from Google Ads, so you don't want to trigger on that. And then if your team is adding UTMs to internal links, which you should not do ever, everybody knows that, right? Is anyone who's like, why can't I add UTMs to internal links? Okay, good. Great. Thank you. It's so bad. Don't do it. It's even worse in GA4 than it was in UA. In UA, at least broke the session, which in retrospect was a blessing. Yeah.
Say why people on the internet.
Okay, so people on the internet, do not add UTMs to your internal links because what happens is, let's say I come to the website via paid, and then I click on a link that says you clicked on the CTA button. That's the source. It's not a source. Stop that. But that's what some marketing person misguided. Their heart's probably in the right place did. And then what happens is then I come back to the website the next day via direct. Now my session is attributed to that UTM that you set on that internal link because Google GA4 will pick the last non-direct session. And it's weird that it picks that. I don't think it should do that, but that's what it does. It's Google's world, we're just living in it. So that's why you should never have UTMs on internal links. Thank you. Anyway, so all you need to do is have a click trigger where you're looking for a click URL of an internal link, because maybe external links I have UTMs on it, that's fine. And then the click URL would contain UTM. That's all you need to do to check for that stuff. And then also, this is one where it's if your URLs are always supposed to have a trailing slash or not, and maybe it's a little bit frustrating because sometimes your developer's like, oh yeah, they totally do, and then you go on the site, you're like, actually it's not forcing it at all, and you don't trust the developer to actually fix it permanently and things keep getting shut off. This is a great way to check. So what you're looking in this case is this is a regex lookup table specifically. The input variable is again the page path, and then I've included the screenshot here so you have it of this is what, no trailing slash for the home page, yes trailing slash for the home page, no trailing slash for any other page, yes trailing slash for any other page. I did try to combine them, but it kept not working great, and again, don't love regex. Feel free to fix it, regex fans, and then I'll publish something better. This is what I got working, so this is what you get. And then what would happen is you would set up one either event. So if you should have trailing slashes, then you would use this trigger. And if you should not have trailing slashes, no. If you should have trailing slashes, use this trigger. And if you should not have trailing slashes, use this trigger. It gets into like a double negative situation. So just like double check that it's actually doing what you're supposed to be doing before you go ahead and publish it. Another one is if there were redirects before people landed on the URL. And this is where we can start to get into JavaScript variables. I don't know how often people use JavaScript variables, but if you go into Chrome DevTools, go into the console, start typing some stuff, you'll see all these drop-downs come up of various variables. There's all sorts of cool shit hidden in the JavaScript variables. So one of these is window performance navigation redirect count. You'll just obviously just stumble across that by accident, right? I had to Google it. But that will tell you how many redirects that person experienced before they got to the website. So you can see, for example, if there's an accidental daisy chain going on. And that will tell you if someone had 4 redirects before they actually landed on that specific page. And then you can trace what that particular route might have been. You can also, I recommend adding this one in particular to your page view tag as a parameter, and I also recommend, if you don't, make sure to have a separate page view tag so don't just have GA4 added in the configuration tag and let it send the page view. Do a separate page view, because there's all sorts of cool shit that you can cram into the page view tag, one of which would be this JavaScript variable. So in this case, the event parameter would be called page redirects. You can see I have a whole bunch of things in here, which I did not include because it is literally 3 screenshots of stuff that I tossed into the page view tag. But if you know what you're looking at, feel free to go on Playbook and sneak a look behind the scenes, and you'll see all sorts of weird stuff that I record, include the pizza event. And if you know what the pizza event's doing, let me know. I'm curious if you can figure out what it's doing. And then another one would be, is the host name the correct one? Now, normally we would redirect GA4 data to a different GA4 if it is not our primary host name. However, often after big site redos, you do a search and replace, and some development links might get missed, and the development site would render for real live visitors. So in that case, I turn off the redirect to a different GA4, and instead I'll use this lookup table where I'm saying that this is internal again and external. In this case, the input variable is the page host name, as opposed to the one we used earlier, which was the refer, and then I know that this is where the lookup equals external, and then it would fire the trigger in that case. All right, core web vitals. We can do better than this. This is horrible garbage, right? Like, literally nothing happened here. Nothing happened here. This is actually for the Playbook website, which is fine. And I said to Jeff, our main developer, did you do something? He's like, no. Well, then why did this happen? I don't know. Google's just being Google. So nothing happened. This is bad. We can do better. I don't like this. And so what we do is we use this tag template from the true GTM wizard, Simo Ahava, who gives you real-world Core Web Vitals values from your visitor experience, not Google being Google. And so what it does is it fires on page views, and then it will record. You can get it to record all available Web Vitals metrics. You can uncheck this checkbox right here. Down, obviously it won't be at the bottom of your screen, but uncheck that checkbox there, and then you can pick just a couple if you want. And you don't need to trigger in every page. You could just trigger it on a few key pages. Or you could change this trigger so it only triggers if it hits specific threshold values. So you only want to record it when the LCP is more than 2.5 seconds, for example. So this is what the custom event looks like, and then this is what the actual tag looks like. And these slides are going to be published, so you don't have to take a picture of everything, but if you want to remember for later, this is what the tag looks like. And then, so you have the measurement name, etc. You'll note that I have the value as the value parameter. If you have an e-commerce website, don't do this, because it will screw up your e-commerce stuff just a little bit. And as I mentioned, if you have too many values, you can restrict it that way. All right. There's also a built-in trigger for JavaScript error capture. Turn this guy on, and then you can be to your web developer, hey, this website is horrible. It's shocking the amount of JavaScript errors the developers are just totally okay with. Like, there should be none. Anyway, so this is, and there's also built-in variables for the parts of the error that you want to capture, which would be the message, the line, and the URL. All right. And then what is the user agent? This one I always capture all the time. I'm also working on a custom GTM variable template that will capture parts of it because it can be over the 100-character limit. So that's something to watch out for. I'll make sure to publicize that quite a bit when it's out. I do attach this to the configuration tag. And this is the configuration tag that's attached to when GA4 first runs. You can use the configuration tag for parameters that do not change during the session, but you don't want to include anything there that does change, like page path, for example, or anything like that during the session. And as I mentioned, you might have that 100 character limit, so I'm working on that template to fix that up. And then one last tip is you might want to use a separate GA4 for this. Depending upon how much data you're going to be sending as a result, you might be polluting your main GA4 with a whole bunch of stuff that your marketing team does not give a crap about. And if that's the case, then you could totally use a separate GA4 for this stuff. It doesn't loading additional GA4s is a very imperceptible hit to speed, and it's only on that initial load because it's just that initial configuration load, and really you could technically skip the configuration load if you just care about the events and you don't want to record any attribution or anything like that. You could skip that configuration tag entirely, and then you wouldn't even have that tiny load time when the site first loads. So, any questions? You guys okay? That took a little bit.